Well, you'll see our picture on financial stability when we come out on November the 12th with our regular financial stability report. In the meantime, we do focus on the extent to which credit restriction might slow growth, and certainly because of higher rates and high international funding costs and fragility of international funding, we're already seeing an impact through onto business investment. So it is harder for businesses to borrow, and that does have an effect through on the real economy.
The credit lines which had previously been agreed are being withdrawn.
Well, there's plenty of stories around at a time like this. I think you'll generally find that where there may be some credit facilities that banks have had open under certain conditions to corporates, and those conditions haven't always been met. So I think it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Is there a view on whether or not the bank should be involved directly in injecting any liquidity to New Zealand banks if necessary?
Sorry, can you be clearer what you're...
banks yourselves, if the wholesale markets, the relative merits of guaranteeing wholesale deposits and actually making wholesale deposits, lending to the New Zealand banks from the Reserve Bank.
Sorry, I may be slow, but I don't understand your question.
Can the Reserve Bank provide liquidity directly to the New Zealand banks by lending them money to to provide them with wholesale funds?
Yes.
Is there any reflection on whether or not you would be thinking of doing that?
We have been thinking of doing it, and we've announced that we've been, in fact, agreed to do it. And there are facilities with the Reserve Bank whereby the commercial banks can bundle up securities such as residential mortgage-backed securities, use them as security for loans from the Reserve Bank. There is a scope to do that, and that partly underpins our continuing confidence that the banks in New Zealand have plenty of access to liquidity.
In which case, do you have a view on whether or not that's a preferable method to go down as opposed to wholesale guarantees?
Look, that all depends on the cost of wholesale guarantees, so we're not speculating about that at the minute.
450 billion seems to be a very big risk for wholesale guarantees, which is what the number that's been...
Yeah, as I say, we're not speculating on that at the minute.
Dr. Bob, what moved you to call a news conference today? Because you don't normally do that with an OCR.
No, we just thought you might be interested. It is the biggest cut in the OCR since the bank's run its current OCR type system, and we've seen all sorts of speculation given the high degree of uncertainty out there at the minute. So we thought you might be interested in having a chance to question us on it.
Did you feel that the market needed a bit of reassurance?
At the minute, one can see quite a lot of uncertainty leading to all sorts of different views around the market. I should say, actually, we've been surprised, I don't know, but pleased to see the responsibility with which the major media in New Zealand have come through this period. It has been a period when sometimes speculating can be quite unhelpful, even dangerous, and that hasn't generally happened. So we just want to make sure that you've got a chance to question us on all of this. And in particular, we wanted to be able to balance out our views on inflation, which, of course, you've just seen has been the highest in recent history in New Zealand, just as it has in Australia. So it is quite a difficult period to make monetary policy in.
Can you help us with the? I think you can hear me. Can you help us with the tea leaves on future OCR reductions? You made some comment about seeing some real evidence of inflation being brought under control. Is that a suggestion that there may be less haste in, say, an OCR reduction prior to Christmas or just after Christmas?
Yeah, well, we don't actually do tea leaves. It's quite a lot more sophisticated now.
But lay it out for me if you can.
Right. Yes, what we've done today is to front-load some reductions in the official cash rate. Had we not been operating in a period of such international financial market turmoil and international growth concern, we might have decided to go more slower on this. That would have been what we've done in previous contractionary periods. We, however, feel that there is the room to do that, but in terms of announcing this cut, one shouldn't necessarily expect or anticipate or build in future cuts of anything like this magnitude. We will want to see what happens after this. So we've taken quite a lot and done it now in order to help confidence and help get rates recalibrated down to where we feel they should be. But one shouldn't assume that we'll continue in such a radical fashion.
But there will be some form of continuation in OCR reductions, presumably.
Well, as we've said, the market expects to see further reduction, and we would think that's consistent with what we're seeing, provided we do see these inflationary pressures coming off. We've just got to remember we are doing this from a point of very high historical inflation. Now, everybody expects those numbers to come off, but what we're looking at is any evidence that those get entrenched into parts of the system, e.g. the electricity system.
That's why I led to the haste thing, because it might take a little bit of time for that real evidence or that data to come through.
Absolutely. It will take till early next year to get a really clear picture on it.
Why do you say that domestic inflation pressures are so stubbornly high? Why do you think
Because they are.
Well, why do you think they are so high?
Because we see that in some of the labour cost measures. We see it in some of the non-tradable sectors. I've mentioned electricity a couple of times. There will always be in an economy like New Zealand some sectors that do not have to respond very quickly to competitive pressures. We'll be watching those.
Obviously, the electricity sector is government controlled, and that could be simply a matter of government policy to reduce electricity prices.
Well, no, some of it's private, some of it's government-owned. The government-owned is done through the State-Owned Enterprises Act, where they will operate commercially.
Well, yes, but they can be given directions by the State-Owned Enterprises Minister and by the Treasury as necessary.
Well, that's for other parts of government, not for us.
Just to get it on the record.
Sorry, just
in relation to the bank deposits scheme, the details of which was announced yesterday, do you have any view on the final shape of the scheme?
Well, that is the final shape of the retail deposit scheme.
And are you happy with that? I mean, that's obviously something that you've been...
We announced it yesterday. We think that's an appropriate way forward.
How many depositors have got more than $1 million, do you know?
A very small number.
How many depositors have more than $500,000?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that sort of question offhand.
Are those figures available?
Are those figures available? Well, you can go and ask a bank for those.
Ask a bank.
Banks are the people who hold deposits.
I know. We have asked the Reserve Bank in the past about whether or not this...
We've got a broad view of that, not a complete view.
Just to get it on the record, Dr. Bollard, you've made a record cut in the OCR. There's an election coming up in just over 2 weeks. Are they connected in any way?
Well, no, of course not. As normal, we continue to carry out monetary policy in a completely apolitical, neutral way.
If Mr. Key and the National Party win the election, are you quite happy to work with him?
The Reserve Bank, of course, continues to operate completely apolitically, completely neutrally, and we carry out monetary policy and our other functions as specified under the Reserve Bank Act.
Prior to the campaign launches, in that case, then, when you briefed Bill English and John Key, did you then avail them of what the government was thinking of in terms of the guarantee deposit scheme?
Together with the Secretary of Treasury, I've briefed senior opposition members and of a number of parties with the knowledge of the Minister of Finance about the issues that are around at the minute. The issues that are around at the minute are clearly the banking issues and the broad macroeconomy. And so they understand our views on that, and I think that's been quite appropriate. We've done that jointly with Treasury.
So it would be fair to say that before the campaign launches, John Key and Bill English would have known about the guaranteed deposits?
No, that's not what I said.
Would that be fair if you were...
Well, I don't know. You'll need to ask them. We didn't brief them before the launches.
Even